I am recording on a rainy day. If you can hear the rain, I apologize. But it's once again U.S. history time. This time we are talking about William Penn, a man who has a lot I admire about him and some things that I don't. Like most men, he is somewhere more in a gray area, but his conviction to stand up for the oppressed and for tolerance is what I really admire about him. Unlike Columbus, who in my opinion is just a straight-up bad person, Penn is more complicated than that, and I will be telling the good and the bad. So what we're going to do is go through a short version of his life. My main source that I am using is William Penn and the Quaker Legacy by John A. Moretta. This book is a detailed biography of his life, and I have a love-hate relationship with it. Because on one hand, the information is fantastic and invaluable, but on the other hand, he has a way of jumping all over the place in his little timeline. But for the most part, he does stay chronological. It just made it a little difficult sometimes. But I do still, I think, recommend this book. William Penn was born October 14th, 1644. His father, William Penn Sr., was in the English Navy of King Charles I. William Penn Sr. was an often promoted legend of the Navy with his many accomplishments. A civil war happened in England, and King Charles I lost to Oliver Cromwell, who became Lord Protector, which is not a king, but it actually kind of is. And what this meant for Penn Sr. was he was now working for a different leader who wanted different things. Because of his legendary career, Penn Sr. was almost never home, and the little time he spent drinking with his Navy friends. To Penn Jr., this meant he was mostly raised by his mother with a resentment for his absent father growing. To Penn Sr., on the other hand, he saw himself as providing for his family, and in doing so, was doing his duty as a father. Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell then decided to send Penn Sr. to Hispaniola to conquer it, which, if you recall from my Columbus video, Spain had taken over that area and was using slaves there. Also, it's presently Haiti, if that helps you visualize where it is. Penn Sr. attacked, but did not win, and was very afraid of returning without some sort of victory, so he ended up attacking and conquering Jamaica next door. When he returned, he was arrested. The reasoning had been he had no orders to take Jamaica or to return home. Now, why exactly Cromwell had Penn Sr. jailed has speculations. Some say it's because he was embarrassed of losing. Other scholars say Cromwell suspected that Penn lost on purpose because he was still loyal to King Charles I. And I agree with the latter. I'm not sure if he was still loyal to King Charles I. In my opinion, that's the more likely option, that Cromwell suspected that. After 5 weeks, he was released and left the Navy to spend more time with family. This meant that young 11-year-old William Penn was now seeing a lot more of his father. They left England and went to Ireland, where Penn Sr. not only had a large estate, but multiple properties he owned as a landlord. Here he began teaching William his ways of leadership, swordsmanship, and property management. To William, who had not spent a lot of time with his father till now, this felt less like bonding together and more like a stranger trying to change him. William wasn't even interested in those things. He was far more interested in religious studies, which is a sentence that sounds really silly to me, but that's how it was. I imagine it's like this. William, come here, lad, let's throw the old pigskin around. No, Dad, I want to read my Bible. It was here in Ireland where Penn met his first Quaker. The Quakers, also known as the Society of Friends, were Christians, but a different kind of Christian from the acceptable one. To Quakers, the most important part was something they call the inner light, which is sort of like the Holy Spirit inside of you. Things like singing songs of worship or preaching sermons were not much of a thing to them. Quakers held meetings of silence where they sat and waited for the inner light to come to them and reveal something. They didn't feel you needed to talk to pastors or priests to talk to God, and also women were equals, and pacifism was mandatory. Now, different Quakers might hold different beliefs on Christian doctrine from other Quakers as well. Penn's personal Quaker views didn't always match the majority of the Quakers, but that didn't make him any less of a Quaker. So the Anglican Church said, "Wait a minute, are you doing Christianity differently? That's not cool. Boys, get out there and show them some real Christian love." And so the Quakers were whipped and beaten. This wasn't a localized Irish issue. Wherever Quakers went, they were persecuted. In Massachusetts, they got their ears lopped off and their tongues gouged and were imprisoned. In Boston, a law was passed to be able to arrest them and hold them in prison without a warrant. So Quakers were fleeing both England and North America, and that's why they were in Ireland at the time. Now, Penn Sr. had invited this Quaker to their home to tell them what they were all about. And Penn Jr., he was blown away by this guy. He was straight like, "Wow, them dudes is spittin' facts, yo." Lord Protector Cromwell eventually died, and Charles II comes to power as king. How all that happened is very interesting, but not important to the story. What is important is that the Penn family moves back to England now, and Penn Sr. again joins the Navy. Penn Jr. ends up at Oxford to continue his education. The laws against non-Anglican Christianity were hitting Oxford at the time, and Puritans and any teaching seen as Puritan were being removed from the school. While Penn was mostly a loner throughout his life, in his second year he met some Puritan friends and hung out with them. He even attended the classes of one of the Puritans who had not been fired yet. To him, the Puritans were nicer and more humble. "Excuse me," said Oxford. "Please stop being a different kind of Christian. You are expelled, young man." And so William Penn went home to tell his father he was expelled. His father decided the best course of action was to get up in his face and scream at him about how hanging out with Puritans would hurt his future and his political career. And to be expelled? Unacceptable. He then hit William, whipped William, and threw him out of the house. And Penn's mom was like, darling, baby, listen, I'm not questioning you, it's just that how exactly is he supposed to have that political career you want him to have if he's, homeless?" And William Sr. was like, "Oh, fine, whatever, he can come back." Now, regarding William Sr.'s actions here, well, I obviously don't agree with them, and I do think there are far better ways to handle that situation. Let me speculate a moment. It was not a very safe time to be a different kind of Christian than the established one. You could argue he did this as a scared straight kind of thing to make his son fear that, because what he did, well, rough and very mean, is far kinder than what the church was doing to people. This was just speculation, though. I have no proof what was on William Sr.'s mind, nor do I think this was the way to handle it. Anyway, back to non-speculation. So, William Sr. sent his son to Paris to continue his education with the hopes that the school there would teach him how to act properly. Penn Jr., on the other hand, did not care much for the people there, and at one point a Frenchman got in a fight with Penn. The two drew swords, and Penn was the victor. According to law, Penn was allowed to kill this man who attacked him, but Penn put away his sword and was like, "Nah, all life is precious to God, and this isn't a fight worth killing over." He started ditching his school there and attending a Protestant school not far away. He learned a lot more about his own religious beliefs and returned to England at 19. Penn Sr. was happy his son was now a scholar and a gentleman, but wanted him to go to law school. But not just any law school, no, this was one where learning law wasn't really mandatory. It was more of a hobnob and gain social status kind of school. But before he could finish, disaster struck England, both in the form of war and also in the form of plague. And Penn soon found himself on a ship with his father. This actually brought them a little closer together as they were now working together, fighting together, and Penn saw firsthand what a mighty leader and warrior his father was. Penn Sr. needed a messenger to be sent back to the king, so he sent William Jr., who gave the king the message and then went back to law school. Arriving back home, the weight of the persecution of the non-Anglican Christianity was heavy. There were people in stocks, there were trash being thrown at them, and there were many being arrested, such as the Quakers. William saw all this and he felt for them. And with the plague going on, scores of the sick and dying filled the land. And who were the ones helping? The Quakers. They were passing out food, giving medical aid, and helping bury the bodies. All this just to be rounded up, arrested, and tortured. Penn was having an internal battle. Did he continue his career of what his father wanted, or did he ditch everything and become a Quaker? You could say, inside Penn are two wolves. Meanwhile, his father got in trouble for not killing the Dutch people who retreated from him, and now he was stuck on desk duty, which he was actually happy about because he was getting old and he couldn't fight as well anymore, and now he could spend more time molding his son into what he wanted him to be. So Penn Jr. did a little politics, and then was sent to Ireland to take care of his dad's estate and rental properties. Well, in Ireland, it turns out that the Quaker who was in their home so long ago was here in town. So William went to a Quaker meeting to see him and meet the other Quakers. He really connected with the things they were saying and was very emotional. He began to hang out with them more, which also meant he was now seeing their persecution up close. At one point, a soldier was going to arrest them, and Penn drew his sword and began fighting. But the Quakers were like, "Whoa, buddy, no, stop. We don't fight here, we're pacifists." So the soldier got away, and then he showed back up with reinforcements and arrested them. The mayor saw Penn in his fancy clothes and realized there had to be some sort of mistake, because he can't be a Quaker in that drip. But Penn, knowing full well he could have left, stuck to his morals and bravely announced that he was a Quaker, just like them. He surrendered his sword, and off he went to jail. He would no longer use weapons, as he was now a Quaker. Due to his connections, he wasn't there more than a few days, and they were all released. But now he had to go explain to his dad what happened, knowing full well his dad wouldn't be happy about it. His father this time did not get violent, he simply wanted to make clear his worries about his son being a Quaker. First was the Quakers' use of thee and thou all the time instead of you and I, which was fine for common folk, but was seen as rude for people of a greater status. To William Jr., this indicated that regardless of social status, all people are equal. To William Sr., this was something that could get his son into trouble. Issue 2 was Quakers don't remove their hats in front of people of high status. Once again, Jr. saw it as equality, and Sr. saw it as dangerous. His last issue was that being a Quaker could not only hurt his social status, but get him killed, but William Jr.'s mind was made up and there was no stopping him. So shortly later, William Jr. was once again arrested for being a Quaker. Penn Sr. decided he had enough, and he kicked Penn out at 24. Penn moved in with a well-to-do Quaker merchant, and he fell in love with his daughter. The two of them were very much into each other, and she wanted no man but him. Penn said he had too much work and he needed to do that before he was ready for the marriage, and she agreed to wait for him. So off Penn went on his mission to stop Quaker persecution. He attended meetings, he wrote essays, he went to debates. All of this was getting him into trouble. His essays especially were getting him into trouble, as a lot of things he was saying were angering people. He was anti-predestination. He didn't think Christ was God, but a good man who is a great example of how to be a loving pacifist. And he didn't believe in the Trinity. For context, these were his beliefs and not the beliefs of Quakers as a whole, and this plopped him in a jail cell for 9 months until he agreed to write an essay taking back what he said. And he did, sort of. He said he was wrong and Jesus is the Son of God, but then he didn't address the rest, which was good enough, and he was freed. And now, yes, he did renounce that, but let me defend him for a second. Sure, it is possible he changed his mind after jail time. That is possible. I'm not throwing that out. But people will say a lot of things they don't believe under duress. I believe my hair is blonde, but if you said I had to go to jail until I, claimed it was brown, well, okay, I guess my hair is brown. Does that mean I believe it? No, it just means I was forced to claim that. I don't know whether Penn actually changed his belief or not. I just know He claimed to, after being in jail. He went to tell his family what had happened, and to his surprise, his father was not angry. Penn Sr.'s health was rapidly deteriorating, and he didn't want his final years spent arguing. He asked William to go back to Ireland and get all his properties in order for when his death comes. So off he went to Ireland. And then he saw the Quakers being persecuted, so he took a 3-month side quest of getting them freed from prison, and then he took care of his father's property. Returning to England to tell his father he did what he asked, he once again got distracted by a Save the Quakers side quest. And this time he was arrested. The judge disliked Penn, and he claimed he was trying to start a riot. Penn argued his innocence, and the jury found him innocent as well. This made the judge mad, and he told them to reconsider their answer. So they did, and still said he was innocent. And this made the judge so mad, he imprisoned the jury there with no food and water until they would come up with the verdict he wanted to hear. The next night, they were again asked, and they said not guilty. So the judge sent Penn and all of them to prison with fines. Now this was huge news. This was no longer William Penn and the Quakers versus the court. This was the people versus the court. As how could there be justice if the judge won't accept the verdict? Quakers and non-Quakers alike saw this as an awful thing, and the story was spreading. Eventually, after being freed and paying their fines, they sued the court, which eventually made it unlawful for a judge to do anything to coerce a jury in any matter. This made William not just a Quaker hero, but a hero to the English people as well. And the details are very interesting if you want to learn more about that case. It's called Bushell's case, but we need to stick to Penn for this video. It was Penn Sr. who paid the fines as he was fading fast and needed to see his son before he died. They spent their last week together, and William Sr. let his son know that not only was he now accepting of his son as a Quaker, but he also said, quote, "Let nothing in this world tempt you to wrong your conscience." End quote. William Sr. died that week, leaving wealth to his family. Penn went back to his fiancée, vented, and asked her again if she was still willing to wait for him, and she said yes. So off he went again on his mission. Penn went back to Oxford and saw how poorly the Quakers were being treated, and called the Supreme Chancellor of the school a poor mushroom, stating, "Better thou hast never been born." He went back to prison again for another 6 months, and then he went to hang out with his fiancée. Together they saw George Fox, founder of the Quakers. He set sail to the New World to try to promote Quakerism. Penn got married in April 4th, 1672, and for a short time everything was peaceful and nice. George Fox returned and was arrested, so Penn decided to plead with the Duke, who was a Catholic and therefore also a persecuted Christianity. The Duke managed to get him free. It was around this time when Penn came around to the idea of a colony in the New World, one of religious freedom, where Christian and Catholic and Quaker alike could all live to express their religion. Quakers did have some land in New Jersey, but there was a lot of problems with it that made it less than ideal. King Charles II owed a great deal of debt to William's father, and with current finances, it was easier to give William some land than some money. Not just any land that no one was currently fighting for ownership of. On top of that, the king could rid himself of some Quakers. It was a win-win. Penn was granted Pennsylvania. Penn because it was named after his father, and Sylvania, which is Latin for woods. So while the land belonged to England, it was to be governed by Penn, with him making money off the land he would sell to the settlers. And yes, it would have religious freedom. Now, well, I say this was a holy experiment of religious freedom, and that's super wonderful. I don't know how far that religious toleration extended. Yes, it was religious freedom for all various kinds of Christians, but was it freedom for non-Christian religions? I don't know, as it was really only Christians moving in. I will say, though, that they got along very well with the natives, and as far as I know, they did not persecute them for their religion, so maybe. However, I don't know. Point being, though, this is a more tolerant religious place than most places. His main city was the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. During this time of forming a government for the settlement, Penn once again was wrestling with himself. On one hand, he wanted to be for the people, Quakers especially, but on the other hand, he needed to make money both for England and for the large sum he had spent himself. Therefore, he often leaned more towards the business side. He needed people with the skills to build a colony. He needed people with the wealth to build a colony. And in needing them, the wealth and power ended up right back in the hands of those who already had it and had traveled from England with it. And those who came poor, hoping for new opportunity, would find they were still going to be poor. Once again, the few held power over the many. Now, there actually was some new equalities. Women who owned enough land could vote, so that was something. Penn fought for equality, but also set up unequal systems. Penn fought for equality, but did not befriend the poor and spent most of his time with the wealthy, while also having a distaste for them. And Penn fought for equality while also owning servants and slaves. There was a hypocriticalness to him that made some Quakers dislike him, while others still idolized him. Now, another thing Penn did that I admire is, despite the king claiming the land, Penn went to the natives to ask if he could purchase it. And get this, he even traded things they would actually want for it, things they were using as currency. And by actually treating them with decency, there was peace among them, unlike in other colonies. Penn even took to learning their language and customs, and the peace between the natives and English was so great here that many other tribes began traveling away from other colonies to come there. Penn not only welcomed this in respect of them, but also because he was not doing well financially and thought having an exclusive native trading hub would be beneficial to him. After 22 months, Penn put some folks in charge and left to England again for a couple reasons. The first was a land dispute with a guy named Lord Baltimore, and another was to spend time with his wife and kids. While waiting to dispute this land, King Charles II died and James became king. Penn not only knew James, but also, because James was a Catholic, perhaps he could convince him of religious toleration in England as well. He won the land dispute and began promoting the idea that religious tolerance could be good for everyone's coin purse. And while this was picking up steam, some people were afraid there would be a pure Catholic control, so they wrote some letters to others who were in line for the throne. War happened, James and his family dipped, and now there were new rulers, William and Mary. Anyone seen as being associated with James was now seen as a traitor and an enemy to the crown, and Penn's name was up there. He now spent his time being arrested and freed and arrested again, over and over and over, and this was costing him a lot of money. On top of that, people saw him as an absentee landlord, and they stopped paying him rent, which meant his finances were getting worse and worse. And he refused to change how much he spent, even with a declining income. To prove to the new rulers he wasn't a traitor, he spent a significant sum on various things for the English Navy to have. He lost Pennsylvania well there, but after 3 years he managed to get it back, and yet he still did not return. His wife had become ill and eventually died, and his son also became ill and died. Penn was in mourning and fell in love with a Quaker named Hannah, and he pestered her for 2 years non-stop until she eventually gave in. He remarried at age 51 and she was 25. After 15 years, he finally returned to Pennsylvania in the year 1699, this time with his family with him. Things had changed, though. Pennsylvania was now the second biggest city in the colonies, and everyone was fighting over wealth and political power. Even his fellow Quakers. The Quakers were fearing becoming a religious minority again, so they were more power-hungry and less accepting of others. Illegal trading was happening, and many people were talking about how maybe they don't need a king and could self-govern. And Penn, needing both money and to prove loyalty to the crown, was hounding people for money, which made people even more divided on where they stood with him. Penn left again in 1701, making even those who were idolizing him feel abandoned again. He left to discuss a bill, and while this was an important bill, it did seem that if he could find any excuse to return to England, he would take it. After that, he spent a lot of time in England doing political things, meaning he wasn't home much for his kids or wife, mirroring how his father was before him. He even ended up in a debtor's prison for a little bit. His financial trouble got worse and worse and worse. He was growing old and tired of everything, and he kept having strokes, and due to a bad one in 1713, he was no longer able to take care of himself. His wife Hannah had to help him with everything, as Penn couldn't do much of anything, and at the age of 71 in 1718, William Penn died. A man who fought for religious freedom, founded a place that could have it, treated the natives well, and was often a hero to the people. Yet he was also a slave-owning, absent landlord elitist who saw himself as better than the poor. So what was he? A good man? A bad man? Consider this before you decide. His actions, while not on purpose and indirectly, did create the NFL football team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Please consider that before you decide.